All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 10 with our good buddy Chris Emerson, and we have Indian philosophy and the Vedas.
Yo, yo.
What's up?
All right, let's jump into this. So, what Vedas have you read, Chris? Or have you only read a couple? Or
I am in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm still working on it. It's a massive undertaking.
What's a Vedas? What is this?
That's the ancient Indian texts, kind of like the Bibles, but of like ancient India, kind of a thing.
Gotcha.
But it's more constructive. Like there's medical ones. There's like a thing kind of for everything. But that's actually the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, which has got like a bunch of different books as part of it. But the Bhagavad Gita is that the Bhagavad Gita is actually part of that. And the Mahabharata is actually the longest poem ever written. I think they said it's like 1.8 million words, 200,000 verses, and it's like 10 times as long as the Iliad.
Damn.
Yeah, it's massive. So yeah, so while I am studying the Bhagavad Gita, what I mostly study is the work of Swami Parthasarathi, who is the founder of the Vedanta Academy it's by Mumbai, India, and he's the author of, I think it's 11 books, and one of which is the commentary of the Bhagavad Gita that I'm reading. So it's the verses and then his commentary, and it's really challenging. I mean, it's a massive amount of stuff to take in, and it's very poetic. Like you said, it's like a poem, and it's hard to kind of decode sometimes. But the book. So what I mostly study is the philosophy of Vedanta, and it's all connected. So the underlying philosophy of Vedanta is what I really love because of the practical use of a lot of it. And so he has some books that are really great. He's really good, Swamiji, at taking these really amazing and ancient. I mean, we were kind of texting about this yesterday. You know how old these texts are. I mean, they're thousands and thousands.
It says there's no specific, but they think it might be like 8th or 9th century BC, maybe even earlier. But that's just what
Oh no, it's much older than that. It's at least 5,
I think so too. But if you go
Yeah.
by like what the scholars say or whatever, yeah, I mean,
most
people have it. Most people have it at like
those guys.
Most people have it at like 300 BC, which I don't believe either. I mean,
for what though? What are you speaking about?
The what we're talking about, like the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, like all that stuff. They think is like the Iron Age, like in between like 1000 and 1 AD, like kind of somewhere in there.
No, I'm fairly certain that's incorrect.
That's on Wikipedia.
Can somebody look this
too,
up?
Yeah, it's on Wikipedia.
Oh, Wikipedia. Oh no.
I agree with you though. I think it's like thousands of BC is what I think it is.
Well,
but I'm just going by what mainstream says it is.
Well, look, these are the same people that tell us that it was hunter gatherers. You're just talking about, the temple, Göbekli. It's like
right.
I mean, the things mainstream says about Egypt, and the Great Pyramids. It's like, I mean, I would take
Absolutely,
that with not a grain of salt, but a massive satchel.
A big block of fucking sandstone, huh?
Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah, but anyway, there's some amazing truths, but the philosophy of Vedanta is so amazing because it's so universal. It's not, it's not a religion per se. It's very religious in the sense that it's trying to get us back to the true self. But anybody from any background could get something out of it, and it could even enhance whatever you're religious affiliation or lack of, could enhance it.
I was going to ask you, not to get off topic or whatever, but what would be a good beginner approach to getting into this stuff?
Of Vedanta specifically? Yeah. I would recommend The Fall of the Human Intellect by the same author, A. Parthasarathi. It's a really good kind of distilled. It's like a bit of a simplified version of some of his other works. The one that, so in addition to the Bhagavad Gita, I do a weekly study group, and we're studying the Vedanta treatise, which is maybe his most popular book. It's a bestseller, and, so on and so forth. But The Fall of the Human Intellect is a really good starting point, or The Holocaust of Attachment, or he has a few others that are,
Now, what would you say, we hear all this, Swami, what's the difference between a Swami and a guru? Because I know there are gurus in India, too.
Well, Swamiji is just a term of endearment.
People say Swami, they consider, that's considered grouping, if you were to say guru or spiritual leader or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Is it all the same thing? That's what I'm asking,
it'd be it's kind of like how you say, let me think of the way to articulate this. You wouldn't, if you were in person with him, you would say, "Oh, Swamiji, thank you." You wouldn't say, "Oh, Guru, thank you."
Right.
You know what I mean? He is a guru because he's
But you might
teacher.
tell other people that he is your guru, is what you would probably say then.
I would have no problem with that.
Or you would just say Swami still. That's what I'm asking.
He's a guru. He's a teacher. He's somebody that's trying to push humanity forward. So he's a great teacher. As far I don't speak Sanskrit, or I'm not or anything like that. But it's kind of like saying. I guess this is kind of different, but it's like you say dad, you don't say father, or what I mean. It's just a term. Swamiji, it's like a respect, and it's a term of endearment.
Okay, makes sense.
But he is a guru for sure.
So
to a lot of people.
Let's talk about the author of all this original stuff. I think his name is Vyasa. Is that correct? He's basically, they call him the recorder, or the person that records everything. And he was the original author of all this. And it's said to have come to him from the gods. And then he passed it along, to the people. And he's considered one of seven, around the world, there's all these sevens, like the Apkalu, the seven disciples. There's seven of all of these spiritual people that are associated with divinity throughout most cultures. If you look through the history, whether it be South American, Indian, Buddhism, there's always some sort of seven connected with that. So it's kind of weird.
7 notes in the scale, 7 days in the week. There's a lot of sevens. That's for sure. I can't really speak too much to the original OG, but as a whole, it's really some incredible stuff. Obviously, like we've said, it's a massive amount of material. And the stuff I've read, for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, is very there are other hurdles you have to get around when you're reading it too, as far as understanding sort of the language of the time and the way that things were said and the metaphors that are being used. And there's a lot of and I feel like it seems like the Bible is similar in that sense, where it's they're trying to tell you a story through. Were we talking about this before, getting truths out of poems or
that was my next question, actually, was you think it's more of an allegory? Do you think there's anything in there that's literal, or do you think that it's just more of a whole, a satire, an allegory type thing, where you're supposed to just take from it what you interpret based off of your studies?
Did you want to say something, Hogan, or do you want
I was just going to say that a lot of Catholics actually take, a lot of Christians take the Bible as literal. A lot of people are think that this is literally what it's supposed to mean, is what's, you know, it's saying. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah, but it, to the point that it's supposed to be literal. I think this is like mystical beings, or, you know, some of this stuff. And I think it's something I've touched on a little bit, as far as, now this is stuff I've learned from Swamiji, is that what happened was the ancients recognized that people, they call it, they made a distinction between the formless Brahman, they call it. So you could call that God, you know, if you want, the source, but it's everything. So it's formless. It's very similar to what quantum scientists say, or physicists say. You know, there's this state of potential, and it, you know, it could be this or it could be that. And
yeah, that's what we were talking about. Dark energy, or dark matter, they think are these particles that are like chameleon, like it becomes whatever it needs to be for the next progression of whatever that is.
Yeah. So what they recognize is that the average person can't really well, not even just the average person. It's just very hard to wrap your head around the concept intellectually or emotionally or any of that, of this formless, potentially causeless cause, you know, these kind of things that are beyond our grasp. So what they did was create these deities as personified expressions of it. So for instance, if there was somebody that was inclined to be like a business type, you know, a merchant or whatever, they had a god for that, or a god for war, or a god for this, or a god for that, you know what I mean? But it wasn't but it wasn't to be, as I understand it, to be taken literally as all these beings flying around.
That's what Christianity got it wrong, man.
Well, no, I mean, what we're talking about, these texts, they do have these things. They're called Vimanas, and they're flying machines. And actually, there's been aerospace engineers that have taken these exact directions out of these Vedas that we're talking about and recreated these things, and they fly. Like one of them was made out of wood, and it kind of looked like a blimp, but in a weird way, and it like flew and everything. So there's some stuff going on there. Like obviously, they had technology to fly around. I mean, it's in their books from and it works.
Yeah. I didn't even. I was using flying around as like beings.
You mean like an angel or something?
Yeah. So like it was more a way for people to have something to connect to. It's kind of like, I think that's the attraction for a lot of people, for instance, with Christianity, because there's a specific deity, there's a specific being that you're kind of surrendering to, and you're devoted to.
Plus, you can look in the mirror and see what it's, you're a spinning image of God or whatever.
Oh, you cut out on me. What'd you say, Hogan?
I was just saying that you're a spinning image of God. I mean, that's why Christianity people can say like, I look similar to this deity or whatever.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of parallels with that kind of concept of the kingdom of God is within you, and then there's that, but that's really the crux of Vedanta anyway, is that like I know we've done this thing. Who are you? And then you say, I'm Hogan, and then no, you're not Hogan. That's your name. I'm a human. No, you're not. That's your it, like you can go through it.
I'm Kevin. No, I'm not. I'm Maurice.
I'm Dogan. No, I'm not. I'm Hogan. No, I'm not. I'm Jimmy.
I'm Jimmy. Yeah, no. So it's trying to get it. What it's saying is that that Brahman is expressed as Atman, is the individual expression of it in everybody, but it's the same source. It's the same. It's the
I like this stuff.
That sounds like the Egyptian thing too. Like Atman. Like they have an Atman. I don't know exactly what it is, but if you look it up, I think there's something very similar in Egyptian, ancient Egyptian text too.
Yeah. So but in what it's saying is that, look, we're searching all over for things externally, but there's only one place to look. And so like now, as far as the Bhagavad Gita, as far as I understand it, it's the story about these two families. There's one that is more righteous, and one that's kind of, you know, they're not so much. They're evil.
Corrupt.
And there's this epic battle that ensues. And so Arjuna is one of the main characters in the story, and he's this fierce warrior. And Krishna, he didn't know at the time, but Krishna is this self-realized, like Christ-like being. Okay, but he's a friend of his, but he doesn't realize yet how powerful he is and how wise he is. But anyway, he gets to the battleground, and they're about to have this epic throwdown to get their kingdom back and restore righteousness in the kingdom. And he looks across the battlefield, and he sees all these people. He even sees some family members. He sees people that were his teachers, and so on and so forth. But he looked and he said, how can I fight these people? You know, how can I kill them? You know, these are some of these people I love. And then Krishna, he goes on to tell him, you know, you're being attached. You know, you have to do what's your obligation. You know, you have to do what's right. You're being attached to these people, but and it gets kind of tripped out. You know, the thing is, we see each other and we think that's what it is. We think, oh, here's my body. This is what's real. And he's saying they're going to die, but their body dies. But like, you know, that's not the end of anything anyway. So what's the problem? You know, right. You need to do what's right, you know? And so the rest of the whole thing is him kind of slowly trying to get out, or Krishna's trying to get him out of this despair that he's in, where he's kind of temporarily disabled, like he can't even function and do his duty. But anyway, as far as I understand it so far, it's all a tale of the internal. You know, it's a battle within everybody between good and evil, and doing your duty, you know, and not being attached, or at least, you know, doing the best you can. So now I suppose you could read it and be like, okay, this is a historical event that took place or something, but I don't know. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be,
right.
Be looked
could be
at.
Like Atlantis, like it could have just been a story to describe something that is more of just like a lesson or something.
Yeah, well, you know, and because, you know, we hear this all the time. The only, or I don't know, maybe I do. The only battle, you know, really worth throwing down with is the one that you can do in yourself. I mean, what do you know, it's like, especially nowadays, it's like, you're going to try to change all these people's minds about this or that, or this political view or that view, and you don't even have your own self together. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
right.
It's like, and I'm not saying like anybody, I'm saying my own self. It's like, you know,
sure.
You got to get yourself right, you know?
What, have you come across anything that you find to have some sort of like importance, like in terms of like mystical importance, or do you think everything is just visceral lessons for this world, or have you found anything that you're like, your mind's been blown by it, kind of like you don't know what to make of it?
Yeah, every day I wake up and am alive. It's mystical. I mean, it's an absolute miracle. You know what I mean? Like
telling on the show, like, who am I? Who are you? What is this? Like the fact that we're even having this conversation right now through this machine, you know, it's just like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah, you know, like the whole thing about like, show me evidence for miracles, or show me evidence for this or that. It's like, yeah, like I said, we have this weekly study group, and Vedanta study group, and we were talking about this very thing, and I'm like, what more do you need? We're spinning around, you know, floating around here, you know, chasing this massive sun. Where, you know, like,
I think we're moving at like tens of thousands of miles an hour right now.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. You could do you could think of any little thing. I mean, the incredible balance, the role that the clouds play to give life, the role that all the ecosystems play. Like, it's absolutely incredible and to wonder where a miracle is like.
What do you mean, dude? That's just random stuff, bro. It's just random.
I mean, I don't even have time for that, man. I mean, like, so anyway,
random, bro.
So it kind of sounds like I'm dodging the question maybe a little bit, but I really think that, you know, and especially after the experience that we've been through in that car accident, and then you look and you say, this is that was a small miracle for me, you know.
Yeah, but then you also question, why did we live and some don't?
Well,
maybe it's to live your life, you know, in a productive, you were spared so that you could kind of change your ways or do, you know, like Chris, look at what this kid's done. This kid's gotten into crazy philosophy, cleaned up his life in a super positive way. I think there's some people that don't do that, but I think you'd be missing out on the point, you know?
Well, okay. The question of why did I and why not? Because my good friend, when we were 19, got into a car accident almost in the same place, going the same direction on the same freeway, and didn't make it. But I miss him all the time. But the thing is, I'm less concerned with the question of why did I live, and, you know, I'm more concerned with now what am I going to do with my time? You know,
yeah, that's a positive outlook for sure.
You know what I mean? Because like I said last time we were talking together, there are things that I can't answer. There are things I can't know. What I do know is I am here, or at least I think I am. And so that's not to say I don't waste my. I was just talking with Sarah about this video. I was talking about that podcast that Joe Rogan had with Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about. He was putting things into this really interesting context of wasting your time or being productive. And so the gist of it was he's a professor, a psychologist, and he was asking his students, you know, how much time on average do you think you waste a day? And so like he would ask, okay, 6 hours a day or whatever. I think it was when he said 6 hours a day, like 80% of the class raised their hands.
I'm afraid to question my limit.
Well, check this out. This is a cool way to look at it, even though it's kind of a little, you know, utilitarian in nature. But he was like, how much time? So he said, okay, 6 hours. That's, you know, then he went through all the math, and what it ended up being, he said, how much do you think you're worth? You know, and then he said, let's say $50 an hour or whatever. Okay. And then just the amount, then when you end up at the end of the day, you know, you end up with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential wasted just looking at it through the lens of it, like I said, a utilitarian kind of like economic.
Yeah,
way.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? Like, look at all the time you could be productive. And so anyway,
what about the time I spend dreaming though, bro? Some crazy shit can happen in there.
I had a crazy dream last night too. But
did I.
But really, like, but the point being is that if you are here, you know, it's like then the question is, well, what are you going to do? In what direction are you going to go? You know?
Yeah.
To kick it back to where we were, you're talking about Atmen. There's an Egyptian, it's controversial, but you know the sun that's in all the glyphs with like Akhenaten, it's got all the rays coming off of it, most of the Egyptian glyphs. That's called Aten, and some people think it means like the God within. So there might be something weird correlation between Egyptians and Atmen and Aten. They're both kind of saying similar things about similar aspects of your soul, you know. So there might be something to that.
Yeah, you know, the soul this is another thing we were talking about in the study group is I think it is kind of akin, the concept of Atman seems to me to be akin to the concept of a soul. You know, it's the individual expression of God, really. You know what I mean?
That's what we keep talking about that too. Like in the Urantia book, it talks about you have a spark or like a piece of God within, you know, there's a piece of God within everybody, you know.
Well, okay. Well, yeah. Just think of it logically. So if you believe, and now whatever you want to say about what you think God is, if we say, okay, God at least is the source of what we know and what we are and what we have here. Okay.
Yeah.
Therefore, if that is the source, then that source is, you're a part of that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, there's no question about that.
Do you understand? You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
even if you think of, even if
look what you're made out of, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Well, okay. I was just going to say, even if you're coming from like a reductionist, materialistic point of view, okay, let's look at matter, or look at, like there's a source of matter, and you're part of that. Whether you say, okay, it's from a star or from, a cluster of this or that, it's like there's a connection, there's a oneness, We
were talking about that on the last podcast about AI, how we are
I checked a
completely
little
different.
bit of that out.
Yeah, we're completely different. Like we create them, and they're made from the stars, but so are we. But we can't fathom somebody creating us. So maybe that there's another relationship, like how we are to robots or AI. There's something to us where they like snapped their fingers or did something, or whips, not like a guy, but it could have just been energy. It could have been a pure consciousness soul. It could have been anything. And is where we can't fathom how we were created. That's the same thing of like what a robot would be, like there's something different. There's like a level,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
like we think biology is super, like DNA is super, it's super, super complex. And I think, what's that analogy, Kevin, about the assembling a plane or something in a hurricane is like the equivalent of how DNA was, created?
If a tornado went through a junkyard and assembled a 737 jet, that's like us randomly forming DNA.
And that's a scientist saying that. So that's kind of fucked up. But
that's I mean, come on.
I know, it just didn't happen. I mean, Jesus.
I mean, again, I'm sorry. I just, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, like we're just because we look at ourselves different than things that we can create, maybe this other entity looks at us the same way, not that it doesn't value us, but just that.
How so?
Well, so if we create a robot, that robot isn't going to know. It might know, but it doesn't know, there's no soul, there's nothing there connecting it to. It's just going to do whatever it's told to do. Why we couldn't necessarily interpret something like that, because we only know what we know. There might be something higher than this. There might be multi levels higher than us, that this dude creates this dude, this dude creates this dude, this dude, and it just keeps going. I don't know. It's like the giant's marble within the marble within the marble within the marble. You can only fathom what you can touch with your, or see or smell or whatever, using your senses and what you have on this earth. There could be infinite levels of that,
Yeah. Okay. So to bring it back to the Vedantic point of view with these things, it's like what they say is, there's the I've mentioned this before, I think too. There's the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. Okay, and these are like three states of consciousness that we all experience. But in each one, like for instance, the dreamer is not aware of the waker. When the dreamer is in the dream state, they are convinced that's real.
Yeah.
And then the deep sleeper is in this state of kind of nothingness, and it's and that's unaware of the other two states. Now, when you're the waker, you can think and talk about the dreamer and the deep sleeper, but then similarly, there's this other, that's what they call self-realization. There's this other state. So we're assuming, just like the other states, that what that we're in at that moment is real, and that's the problem. It's an illusion.
But is there ever a realm that is real? So like when we pass away, then we go to a next stage. Is that the real one, or is that a different state of not being?
This is real. Like what here and now, I think this present moment is the only thing that's real, right?
Well, you have to ask yourself, what is real? Okay, because first of all, the organs of perception that we have, you would have to be assuming that you have all that, you have all the tools to see everything that you could see. So this is an interesting thing. I just was reading a children's book with my daughter, and they had this little section, and there's a picture of a flower with a bee, and the flower was yellow. And then they showed what the bee sees is this ultraviolet kind of blue, because they're equipped to see ultraviolet, or and so even in just that case, what is perceived to be real is different for just between a human and a bumblebee. You know what I mean?
Crazy. Yeah.
Or similarly, like I think it's elephants that can hear super, super low frequencies. I might be wrong on that, but
no, I think you're right. I think you're onto something with this whole what we can perceive and perception and senses and all that. I mean, look, I was reading this thing. It's it's comitology something, but it's like the study of ancient Egyptians. But back then they thought they knew of 360 senses. So like there's this bubble around you, like the sphere that you lived within, and every part of that sphere was a sense. Like you literally had a sense for everything. So maybe these people were more advanced in that, like we break it down into 5 things and it's easy and it's simple, but maybe it is far more complicated. And since we don't think about it or work on those other aspects, that, it's always the same thing.
Yeah. But even that, like even the things I'm talking about, there's still dealing with the terrestrial. So I kind of, we get on these stream of consciousness things and I forget what I've talked about. So it might be repetitive, but weren't we talking about the Sattvic and the difference between,
you want more of that Sattvic.
but then talking also about the difference between the gross intellect and the subtle intellect.
Yeah, I think we did talk about that.
Don't worry, you really got to beat us over the head with these facts for us to remember this shit, man.
Yeah, no, this is why you're our resident Eastern philosopher, man. You know the most about this anybody we know. So,
well, you're in trouble.
We got a lot more linen.
No, that's it. I see that. I love that stuff. I think that's fun. It being like, like being able to say, man, I don't know anything, but hey, guess what? That's how much more I have to learn. And it's awesome. Well,
I think that's growth too. There's a lot of people that can't even do that. I think it was hard for my 20s. That was like one of the toughest things for me to battle was I can be wrong, or I am wrong, or I don't know what I'm doing, and it's hard to admit that if you're a proud person,
Yeah. So now back to the gross intellect and subtle intellect. So now what we're talking about in discussing as far as senses and perception and all that, that's gross intellect. So what I mean by that is it's dealing with the terrestrial. It's dealing with matter and such. You know what I mean?
So gross.
It's so disgusting. So, but subtle intellect is trying to get to ultimate truth. Okay, what transcends that. And so like there's this mantra that I really love that is Vedantic in nature. It's to say, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm not my intellect, I'm the self. Okay, so it's beyond that. Whether we can hear a frequency range that's this much wider than what we can now, or whether we can see this or see that, it's still talking about it's still dealing with the material. No,
I mean, a lot of religious stuff backs, even again, not to reference it a million times, that Urantia papers talks about what you're saying, the mind, the intellect, the ego, all that dissolves once you die. You're just pure soul, pure consciousness. And that's literally the only thing that goes on. And if you become too part of the material world, you cease to exist because you've become this materialism. You've materialized, so are no longer fluid between these realms,
And this is, I mean, I think, I think that's why Steiner was really adamant about warning the Ahrimanic, because that's if you want to know what the Ahrimanic way is, it's transhumanism.
So the Kardashians are fucked, is what you're saying.
They're already dead.
Here, I'll say this, man, because I you know, those people popped up on my YouTube. You know, I pull up my YouTube and they're in their underwear and all this. But let me tell you something about them.
Fat ass.
No, let me tell you something about them. They have the same Atman as Swamiji.
Yeah.
You know. And so like but it's hard it's hard to think that this is something that we were talking about also in study group last week. We had a really good discussion last time, but
they're coming back as anal beads is what you're saying, not tigers.
Well, hey man, you get what you ask for, I guess, you know. But like trying to get to a point where you actually try to treat others like you actually believe that everyone has the Atman in them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so I was having this like thought experiment, you know, thinking from the standpoint, like an easy one to think of a figure would be Christ. So, you know, thinking, if you believe the kingdom of God and let's say Christ is within, you would say, well, would you treat Christ in this way? Or would you treat Buddha in this way? Would you treat Swamiji in this way? Would you treat Yoda this way? You know, I
would.
You know what I mean, though? Like, how different would you treat yourself and treat other people? I'm not saying I do this at all. What I was saying, I think it's hard to do something like that, even with the people that you love the most in your life. You know, to think of them as divine. Like, am I really treating, you know, all my family, even the closest people to me, like I believe they're divine?
And
you know?
You're right. I when I meditate, I see that I don't. You know, like I said, I can self-reflect and see situations kind of outside myself, and I notice that I'm not. You know, and if even what you're saying, like find you know your enemy and treat him as if you would treat your like loved one, or if you can you know do that, maybe you can you know transcend or evolve. But I mean, it's so fucking hard. You know, like no matter how you know much you learn or how you know much good energy you want to put out in the world, it's still one of those things where you have this like I don't know, this like piece of you that just wants to resist that, you know.
And
well, I was gonna say it's a good thing to practice. Like I have a friend, you know, and well, we're not gonna go down that road, but
you don't have any friends.
No, it's just a good thing to practice. You know, if you see people doing things that maybe you don't agree with, you kind of accept that that's their thing, and that, you know, maybe not let it bother you so much, because like you said, you know, everybody's part of the same thing here.
Yeah, well, okay, that's a whole other tangent I want to go on in a second, but I wanted to circle back around to the Arjuna Krishna, because then what Krishna was telling Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita was that sometimes what is needed, so as he's looking across the battlefield and saying, how can I kill these people? He's saying, what are you gonna kill? It's just the self anyway. You know, like what do you think you're gonna destroy? You know, so in other words, sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it seems painful, or you know, there's like this you know, you have to even see the self in your enemies, even if you have to battle them to the death, because it's the right thing to do to save somebody. You know what I mean?
Oppenheimer, when he conceived the atomic bomb, he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. He said, "I am death, destroyer of worlds." And he said that he had been getting like some sort of like message from above or something, and that's how he conceived this thing. And he prayed, and he found like whatever entity he thought that he was speaking to told him, this is necessary for the cycle of life, and as much as you will be killing tons of people, you will also be saving tons of people too. So there was like a conundrum, like an inner conundrum there, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean,
well, that sucks that the people that dropped it didn't get that message, because those people like killed themselves or had fucking insane dreams and shit. I mean, could you imagine doing that?
Well, no. Yeah,
that whole insanity.
That whole thing. I mean, I know this is a tired old bit, but you know what? These people that start these wars, let's get to a point where, you know, like these congressmen or whoever it is, you guys go and you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but this guy literally split the atom. That's like not something that should have been taken lightly at all. Like whatever this guy's like Tesla, but you know, like this guy did something that is pretty fucking crazy.
Well,
you know.
Well, look, I mean, that goes for a lot of things. You know, like the internet. You know, like it's something that's an incredible advancement that's used both for good. I mean, we can sit here in different places and discuss things that hopefully we're trying to get to truth, and it could also be used for, you know, all kinds of devious stuff. You know, so.
We talked about that before too, like a car can get you somewhere where you can save somebody's life, but it can also run somebody over and kill somebody, you know. And
the same self that will be in, you know, somebody that's willing to risk their life to save somebody else is the same self that's in the, you know, somebody that would fly a plane into a building or do some crazy thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's not what's making the person do what they're doing, you know. I guess then it comes down to free will and choice. The dilemma of choice is a big thing that is talked about in Vedantic philosophy, that every second of every single person's life, you're faced with a choice. And so then they say, this is where they get really practical with it. They say, are you making your choices from the mind or the intellect? You know, and, you know, you go from there.
So what, you don't want to make decisions from the mind?
This is a great analogy for it, is the mind is like a child that needs supervision. The intellect is the parent. And so it's not that you can't make decisions from the mind, or if you want to call it the heart, because the mind is where it's emotional, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and I guess if you never did that, you wouldn't have some of the amazing art or music, you know, that we love. But then, like, for instance, to make policy from a place of pure emotion is probably not going to be a good road to go down, you know?
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about, the AI one, where people that have seen the future supposedly say that it's run by robots, not that they control it, but that we put them in power, since they will make the right decision every time, you know, because there's no emotion involved in that.
I just heard a story about, in Ohio, some guy was convicted of, I forget, with drug possession or whatever it was. And the judge, instead of referencing his criminal record and assessing his threat, you know, like the risk assessment and all that, she plugged in some algorithm, and then it spouted out what the sentence should be, you know. And I don't know about all that.
It might just be a random thing too. You get, you know, larceny or something. They're like, you're gonna die.
Well, you know, and there's also technologies being used too for like social media and stuff where they're trying to predict where a riot might take place, or through the activity and through
this
the
is like Minority Report, man. They're seeing crimes before they're fucking committed. Shit's crazy.
Well, that's you know, hey, and that's where it's heading.
But then in that movie, there's a big dilemma. Are they a criminal if they might create the crime? You know, they're like arresting them before you're committing the crime.
No,
they aren't a criminal yet.
No, if you believe that, then everybody should be in jail.
Yeah, there's no free will, basically.
Well, that was the conundrum.
You're not even allowed to make your own decisions, you know.
Well, no, right. I mean, if you really believe anything, I mean, like that's not a good, you know, that's not a good logical, sound way to look at anything. I mean, if that's how you're looking.
Hey man, they did it in that Minority Report, man.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise used that judgment, bro.
He also believes in Scientology, and as much as I believe in spirituality and religion, let's face it, that's a fucking cult. So. Oh
man.
They keep people there.
Yeah, but what Minority Report, isn't that a Philip K. Dick book?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I just saw the major.
Oh, I kind of thought it was. Can somebody verify that?
Oh, let me look that up. Yeah, I'll find that out. Why? What's going on with that guy?
Oh,
doesn't sound good.
Yeah, that moan. Yep, writers Philip K. Dick.
So he was a
Andy's brother.
God, that guy, man. Go from the Vedas to Andy Dick.
Kardashians, Andy Dick.
Hashtag.
And it's all the self, man. That's the trip of it all.
Yeah.
But I lost my train of thought. Oh, Philip K. Dick. The other Dick. Okay, yeah, he was a science fiction writer, and he wrote like A Scanner Darkly. That's another Richard Linklater film where he did.
Yeah, I want to watch those. Rotoscope.
Yeah, and so, but anyway, I think he was really worried about, this kind of dystopian future that it's almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like we know where this is leading and we're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Like you got,
2 of Black Mirror. It's exactly what you're describing pretty much.
Oh man, I tried to watch that show, and I because you guys were talking, or Hogan was talking about it, and the thing is, I understand that they're trying to make a commentary about certain things, but it's just so vulgar and
it is,
it's a bit nutty.
Man, I lost my thought again. Where was I going?
Minority Report.
Oh yeah. So if you guys want to really see what I'm talking about somebody that knows where this road is leading with this kind of transhumanist philosophy and all the stuff that goes with it, look up. You guys could do a whole show on this dude, Hugo de Garis.
Hold on, let me write that down.
Oh man.
Hugo de Garis Tyson.
We could do a show on that guy too. but Hugo de Garis.
Like somebody pays that guy, like NASA pays that guy to just tell him whatever they want him to say.
It's almost like.
Yeah, I know, right? Hugo de Garis. So, like, what's this dude's deal?
Well, he's I think he was contracted by the Chinese government, if I'm not well, I haven't looked into him in a while, but he was one of these scientists trying to reverse engineer the human brain for AI. And he was on a mission, but not only that, that's not the surprising thing about it. But what was surprising about him was he openly talks about how dangerous he thinks it is. And then he had this whole scenario. He was like, humanity's going to be split up. And this is actually what's going to happen, is that it's going to be split up into 2 groups. There's going to be, like, for instance, I think of my daughter who's 3.5 now, almost 4 in the spring. By the time she's, let's say, in high school or collegiate age, it could be a scenario where people are chipping their brains or some kind of crazy thing so that you have instant access to, like, Google or things like that. Okay, so there's going to be people that are going to choose to do that, and then there's going to be people that are going to be like, no, I'm not doing that, and then inevitably there's going to be policies.
Skynet, yeah.
Well, there's going to be policies that are going to be made around things like that, and then there's going to be people that are going to resist it. So he had this whole scenario. He called the people that were for the transhumanist ideology the cosmists, and then the people that were against it the Terrans. And he said it's going to be the greatest cause of conflict this century.
That's already happening. People are already putting Wi-Fi things in their brains and stuff. Like, I saw a show that people just are putting, like, mechanical things in their body right now.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's going to become a massive problem, because what's going to happen is if you choose not to do that, you're going to be so far behind in certain things.
It's crazy.
You know what I mean?
So then somebody EMPs this shit, then you fucked, motherfucker.
No, you better start working out, because then your body is going to be, you're going to need to use your body to lift shit, because your brain ain't going to work.
Yeah.
But then so, I mean, and that's all kind of bleak and everything, but I look at it like this. Look, like I said, I'm here. What am I going to do to get myself better? You know, like I make flaws every minute of every day, but what can I do to be a better person? Because I don't believe any of this is it anyway. That's why, like way earlier when you were saying, you know, you were saying this is what's real. And it's like, well, I know what you mean. Like this moment is what we have, I think.
Right.
Am I wrong? And that's what you meant?
No, that's
it's like,
you know, I mean, you know, I believe in like God and spirituality and stuff. So like what I mean is right now is the only thing you can reach out and touch, because a second ago when I just said that, it's already gone, you know?
So. Yeah, yes, in that sense, I agree with you. This, like, we think of this linear version of time and everything, but like I think your sentiment is no. This is all you have. Okay, right. So in that like, sense, it's very
real.
Live
here now. You know, like
yeah,
present moment.
Yeah, it's like. So in that sense, I 100% agree. But then also in the back of my mind, I'm always like, but I need to, I need to wake myself up from it too, you know?
Well, somehow. I agree with you too. There's just too much we don't know to just make a definite, you know, decision on that, obviously. And what you're saying coincides with like what all the ancient texts say. Like, how are these people able to figure this out? And it still makes sense to this day, you know? So, I mean, who knows?
Well, this is the other thing that I to that point that attracts me to Vedantic philosophy is that it's very it compels you to question everything. Okay, so that's the sign of a pretty good philosophy right off the bat, is that you're not supposed to just take anything out of blind faith. There is faith. Faith is a necessity to function. Period. You know, as a society, as an individual, you have to have faith in multiple different kinds of ways. And I'm not talking about just metaphysical. But you have to question everything. You have to experiment with it. You have to these things like distinction between mind and intellect, between gross intellect, subtle intellect, between Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. You know, it's like it really breaks it down, and then it gets down to the dilemma of choice, and then gives you the power ultimately to either create a heaven for yourself or a hell, you know. And that's a massive power and responsibility.
So back to the Mahabharata. But there's a few. So there's the story of is you were talking about the Kurukshetra. Is that what you were talking about? The war between, I think it was the two princes. Is that what you were talking about earlier? The story that you read in the Bhagavad Gita.
What are you calling it? I don't know.
It's called Kurukshetra. And then, so they're all part of this though. So like the Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Dhamvantari, and I don't know how to pronounce that last one.
Anagata Davida,
baby. But then the one I do want to talk about, which I have actually learned a little bit about, was the Ayurveda, which is like the ancient medical text. It's their system. It's like all, you know, like the Eastern medicine. We're talking about Eastern philosophy, but Eastern medicine this is where it's derived from. And it's said to have come from the gods and the sages, and they passed it down to the physicians. And the god that supposedly is the god of medicine is the Dhanvantari guy. It's based on like complex herbal.
That guy sounds Italian. Don Vitari.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
it's
man.
It's like DHANVAN.
Sure, you're reading this right?
Yeah. DHANVANTARI.
He goes, hey, the gods gave it to me.
Yeah.
It's based on complex herbal compounds, minerals, and metal substances. They've had some issues with it in current times because there's some like light mercury and some like lead and like some poisonous metals that are associated with some of the stuff. So there's been some, you know, controversy surrounding that. But I mean, even this is from like ancient BC we're talking about. Some say it's even tens of thousands of years old. You know, it talks about stuff even back then, like rhinoplasty, removing kidney stones, sutures. They think it was created like in the Indus Valley civilization. And it's broken down into disciplines. And here I have a list of it. It's called The first one's the medicine of the body. So that just talks about like things that can help cure, ailments, like, holistic kind of stuff. And then the next one's pediatrics. So that would be like the health of like kids and everything. The next one's the extraction of foreign objects. So if you get something stuck in you or some sort of, arrow or whatever, then it breaks down. The next one's like ears, eyes, nose, and mouth. So like your orifices basically, and how to, deal with those. And then the next one's the pacification of possessing spirits. So that one's kind of hoaxy because it's like, do they mean like, like demonic possession or like one of these gods inhabiting the body, or like what's going on there? I don't know.
Well, that if I could say something about that, this is something that I've talked to my dad a lot about. Is that I think one of the ideas that Steiner would put forth is that if you're not, if you think of your whole self, as we are right now, your body, the decisions you make, the whole thing, if you're not using it for good, you're opening yourself up to be as sort of a vessel for, like he would say, the Ahrimanic, or the Luciferic. And so in that sense, it's like through your own apathy or through your own the Tamasic, you're opening. I mean, that's his way of saying it. I think was like if you're not, it's like the Bob Dylan song. You got to serve. What is it? You got to serve somebody.
Right.
And so
hey, Bob Dylan was Jewish, but then he saw Jesus later on in his life and converted. I mean, most people don't realize that he had some mystical experience in a hotel room. I think in the late 70s.
Yeah, he put some gospel records out.
Yeah, he put a gospel record. Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, most people don't know.
They were garbage.
But he legitimately had like a Jesus experience.
No, I don't know if they were good or bad. Have you heard them?
Well, a little bit. But what I have heard is there's an album that came out that's it's gospel versions of Bob Dylan songs by a group called Brothers and Sisters, and it's incredible. My favorite one is I Shall Be Released.
Yeah,
it's just I mean, imagine that with a full gospel choir. I mean, it's just
the band used to cover that song. It's pretty good. It has a gospel feel to it already.
Well, it's kind of they kind of adopted it. I mean, I think most people think of it as their song. Just like people think of All Along the Watchtower as Jimi Hendrix, because he really made the song. But what he was saying though is the same thing. I think that those people, again, it's these things, these truths that are being said in a poetic way. It's like, we're thinking of it like you're being possessed by a demon or this or that. What it is you're being possessed by lower ideals and ideas, and that's going to create your experience, and that's going to in turn help create what world is around you. And so you got to serve somebody. I think that's what that's about. It's like, man, if you're not. So
that makes sense then, because when I first read that, I'm like, what's going on here? So but now that you explain it in that way, correlated with the things that you've studied, that I mean, it puts a little bit of context to it, so it makes a little bit more sense.
Well, because like if we think of that battle, even if we bring it back to something like, Arjuna and the two families. That's a battle within, and you kind of have to make a choice. If you're doing something that in your own conscience is wrong, you're serving something that's against your own interest.
Sure.
And I mean, I guess you could make a case to call that evil. You're doing something that is, you're, yeah. So that's how I would interpret that.
The last three of these disciplines, the toxicology, obviously that's self-explanatory. Rejuvenation tonics. So obviously they concocted some sort of drinks and potions and tonics. Yeah, some serums, and was able to do some stuff with that. And then the last one, which we all know about, like the Kama Sutra, they're obviously very into the sexual nature.
Hey.
This one's aphrodisiacs, and then it says, and it even says increasing juices like semen and vaginal juices. So they're obviously all about the sex on the, on that front. Obviously, it's for reproducing, but maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think you need that many moves to just to reproduce. But hey, man, you got to have some pleasure somewhere, right?
It's like there's an episode of The Office where Andy Bernard drinks this concoction. It's supposed to be a seahorse concoction from like Chinese herbs, and he drinks like the whole thing, and he gets super sick. So it's supposed to make you like virile, and he drinks the whole thing, and gets super fucking sick. So I mean, I'm sure back then they had all sorts of shit. They probably had testers, like, will this guy die or does this thing work?
Jesus.
Yeah. Well,
I forgot all about that Kama Sutra. Why is, what's up with that? Do you know anything about that?
No, again, I try to, like, as far as the Swamiji,
stays away from that shit.
Well, no, what he said, like for instance, he puts it in the book I referenced, The Fall of the Human Intellect. He talks about reasons why people should or should not get married, and finding people that are compatible with your desires as far as sexual desire. So like if you're very sexually active and have a high desire for it, you would be better off pairing with somebody that has a similar thing, and then you're going to have conflict if there's a disconnect with that. So he's looking at it very practically. So he doesn't get into any of the other stuff, because you have to remember that from a Vedantic point of view, the whole end game is to decrease worldly desire. And I would say sex definitely is one of the most primal, you know what I mean?
But isn't it how you introduce other souls into the world? Isn't it a...
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, yeah, but can you honestly say that when every time you're having sex, you're thinking, oh, look at me, I'm helping create a soul?
No, for sure not. I'm just saying.
He's never had that one.
Of course I'm not. No, of course I'm not saying
the opposite, actually.
But of course I'm not saying sex itself is bad, because we wouldn't be here,
Right.
But you understand what I'm saying? It's like
logistics aren't important as long as it's happening, is what you're saying.
What's that?
I said the logistics aren't as important as long as it's happening, and there's things moving on that front. Basically, like the specifics isn't as important as just the fact that it is happening and that people are procreating and the world's still spinning.
Well, I mean, in Vedanta, the only reason people are born is because they have to exhaust their vasanas. That's your bundle of desires. It's your inherent. To them, that's the why. Why are we here? It's to get rid of the lower self and get to the self with a capital S and drop your desires. That's why we're here. And so then if you don't tame, I mean, it's a powerful thing, the senses, any of them. I mean, you could get caught up in any of them. And, that's a tough one to,
Does it ever talk about what Atman is beyond the scope of just this world? Like, does it ever talk about like the universe or the stars, or like, I know you say it's like everything, but is there any like specifications on that ever, like from anything you've read?
I know that the Vedas do say things about that, but again, the things that I study, they deal with how to be a productive, dynamic, positive person. And so like, I keep coming back to these things where it's like, if I start wondering about, the universe and the origin of this and that, it's like, I can't, you're
saying, does it knock you off your path of like your focus of what you're trying to accomplish? So therefore it's not important to you because it almost like takes away from time that you could be doing to focus on these good things and these self things and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So like, the way that they define, or at least the Swami defines sin, is mental agitation, and and so peace is just a cessation of mental agitation. Now, if I can get a hold of the little things in my life to decrease mental agitation, that's my main concern, you know, and I don't see how I can get to that from pondering about it's fun. Like don't get me wrong. I do like thinking, okay, what is it all?
Here's the thing though, that's your path. That's what you're trying to accomplish. Like for me, I'm on a wisdom path. It's a little bit different because there is a lot of learning involved with that, of like ancillary things that I find sometimes the details in certain things are far more important than the big picture shit. So therefore I'm learning as much shit as I can so I can deduct the details that are important, you know? So I'm on a little bit different of a path, but there's no right or wrong. Like your path, yourself, that's what you should do, you know, because if something takes away from your goal, then, you know, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah.
Maybe not in the sense that you would get something out of it, but it's not directly helping that thing that you're trying to invoke, which is like true, you know, loss of like ego and like true self, you know?
Yeah. You know, and I would define wisdom as, it's knowing how to properly use the knowledge that you've gained, you know, how to apply it.
Sure.
And so like, I would like to get to that point someday, you know, to be able to really know how, like, the interesting thing is that, like at this lecture, so Swamiji's daughter, Sanandaji, comes once a year and does a Bhagavad Gita lecture, and you guys should come next time. She's incredible.
Yeah. When is it?
She usually does it in the fall. So I'll let you guys know.
Is it in Detroit?
She did it out in at this beautiful church out in like West Bloomfield, or it was Orchard Lake or somewhere out there.
Perfect.
You know?
Yeah, let us know. I'm super interested.
Yeah, it'd be worth the drive for you to come back, man, for that. But she does like a 4-day series, and she'll cover a chapter or a specific part of the Bhagavad Gita. But oh man, I just completely
you were telling her that she comes into town and she did a talk, and you were about to give me something.
No, it was something that she said. Oh man, I got so excited about Sanandaji, I lost my train of thought about that.
Must be a good lecture.
Well, there was so many good things she said. What the heck was it that I was going to say that really stuck out to me? Yeah, man.
Yeah, the Tamasic got it, bro. You're done.
Oh man, that's frustrating. Well, maybe it'll come back.
What?
If it was meant to be, it will, bro.
Do you go to a lot of these like lecture type things, or like do you just do it when it involves your teacher or his daughter or whatever, or do you find yourself going to like a lot of that kind of stuff?
I wish I did, but I went to 3 of the 4 nights, and I think I had a gig or something, and I had to play, and then I hold the study group, and the reason that I hold the study group is because the deal is that Swamiji has a disciple, and he's out in Troy, I think, and he kind of said to the owner of the yoga studio, if you guys can get a consistent like 10-15 people coming to your study group, then I'll come in and start teaching, you know. So I'm trying to build that up to get the real guy, you know, because I can sit here and talk about my thoughts on things, but you need somebody that's really like, so he went and put in a lot of time and a lot of thought into this, and so the ideal that I'm working towards is try to get him consistently. So back in the day at the yoga studio I teach at, we used to have lectures semi-regularly, at least, with another one of Swamiji's disciples, who now has he's got a live stream that he does. His name's Gautam, and his channel is called Vedanta with Gautam. You guys should check it out. He's awesome.
Yeah.
But anyway,
he's on YouTube.
Yeah. That was a long answer. I don't get to go to as much as I would like to because Amit, who is the other guy that I'm trying to get to our place, he holds a study group, but I'm always working when he has it. So like so for instance, when Sanandaji comes, it's really like I'd really try to make that a priority to go. There may be a bunch of other people doing stuff.
Send Maurice and his new Maurice's video production company out there and just record it for you.
Yeah, man. They actually have a decent amount of like resources and stuff online for it. So, anyway, but that's where I try to make up through it through the study group, through my own study, and and trying to get that Sattvic time. And I had a few days this week where I really got to get up at 5. And it makes all the difference. I got up, studied. The first should
have been 4, bro. You missed an hour.
Yeah, I did. But then I had like a couple of rehearsals we have a fish gig coming, or a fish cover gig coming up. So I have to rehearse late. And
Chris's
then it's
band, Fluffhead. Check them out. Detroit area local fish cover band. They're pretty sick.
Come heckle. And
throw your tomatoes.
But anyway, so then that's the tough thing, man, because then I have a rehearsal and I'm up till midnight, and it's like it's tough.
Yeah, Trey will do that to you. You picked the wrong band to cover, my friend.
I would love it. Like on that note, like he seems like he has some cool ideas about life. And
have you ever listened to Gayudi or Story of a Ghost? It talks about a ghost. Like, did you ever listen to the lyrics of that? I was texting Kevin one night. The weirdest shit, like if you sit there and you're in the right mind, you can kind of take what he's kind of saying and you're like, this is some mystical shit that's happening.
I could tell you exactly what Ghost is about, because Tom Marshall did a podcast and discussed it. Yeah.
Nice.
So what he said happened was when he was whatever that school was, Taft or whatever in New Jersey where they went to school, he had a friend and he I'm going to mess this story up, but this guy was sort of like, what did he call him? His soul protector or something. And this guy just would like, they had this telepathic weird thing. You'll have to go back. He has a podcast called Under the Scales. Have you guys listened to this?
No, I never even knew I didn't know anything about this.
You guys would you guys got to listen. It's phenomenal. He has Trey on, and Trey's telling all these stories and all this stuff. But anyway, that's what Ghost is about. He had this friend. He's like, I feel like and he's telling the lyric is from the standpoint of telling Trey, I feel like I never told you the story about the ghost I once knew and talked to, but would never boast. Like he never told anybody about it. And then he said years later, because there was, I'm forgetting, there was one incident that was really incredible where the guy like kind of said what he was thinking or something.
So like in that song, when you listen to the lyrics, it talks about like what I took from it was somebody was communicating with somebody like a ghost or something, and that he was receiving like productive shit to use, like I forget the lyric, but it talks about like he gained like enlightenment from something that he learned from this thing, Well,
yeah, it was
not like enlightenment in terms of like enlightenment, but like he learned something very important,
it had a really profound effect on him. You got to look up that specific episode. You should listen to it today, man. You love it. But then here's the crazy thing. Then he like years later, because he's still friends with the guy, he was like having dinner and he was like, I never really talked to you about, because they didn't really talk about it. It was this unspoken thing. And he's like, you kind of, I think he felt like he saved his life or something. And then the friend was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And like completely denied it. So it's a weird thing. So it's like, it's a weird thing where you could have this talk about, what's real, this perception of this thing or this relationship. And the guy's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, man.
Gayudi, I was listening the same night we're talking about Ghost. I did the same thing with Gayudi. I think I was watching Fish on YouTube from like a small club in New York, I think in like the late 90s. And there was like, it was like some show like Backstage or Soundstage or something
awesome.
Like that.
I love
that. Yeah, I've seen that. It's pretty sick.
And they talk like a little bit before each song or whatever, but then they played that and then they played Gayudi. And Gayudi, when I was listening to it, I'm like, this has something to do with like the devil or like a demon or something trying to, like something that came to one of them in the middle of the night. I don't know how that one was written either, but I know some of the stuff's in the fish book, and I know some of it, you know, people know, but
that whole album has like a dark overtone to it, even the artwork and everything.
Well, Gayudi was written in 1994.
Yeah, it's somewhat old.
And it was also it was written as a piece with, I think, My Friend.
Yeah, that's a classical composition, because that was one of the more composition ones, kind of like how they did Hunta. That's like one of the songs that was kind of like run over, you know.
What's that?
My friend, like the way it's composed, like it's kind of more, it should have been like on Hunta, like the style of it compared to Rift.
Yeah. Yeah, so those two were written as a piece together, I think, was the original idea. And then
he plays them with the classical orchestra. When he does that, he plays both of those.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then he kind of bagged it because he didn't feel like it was up to par, you know. And so then they left it alone for a while, and then they came back to it, you know, with stories.
Well, as you know, Gayudi's hard as fuck to play. I mean, I can play the first couple parts, but then it gets into the chaos, and I just lose it there.
Yeah, it is hard. It is, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to ask you though, how did you arrive on these Vedas and this Indian? Like, obviously, you were on a spiritual quest after that accident. You were changing your life, turning everything around. What did you like? How did you arrive on this? Like, what, like, out of all the religions and all the cultures, like Buddhism, Hindu, you know, all the stuff, like, what drew you the most? Like, what spoke to you to help you? Like, I think everybody's got their own idea of what works or what they think is the truth or whatever, but like, what about it made that your truth?
Well, let's see. That's a tough one. Well, a lot of things were happening all kind of like in concert with each other, you know, like that accident happened, but it wasn't like the next day, you know.
Well, I'm sure you were fucked up, obviously, but I'm saying like down the line, like when you started, like, you know, we all stayed together, you were doing yoga, you were doing all this crazy shit. And then I don't think you were there of where you are now back then in terms of the spiritual side. I think it was just more you were being healthy and cleaning up your mind,
actually,
and body and everything.
It's actually the other way around. What happened was
really?
Yeah, this would have been like towards the end of 2008. I was like, I was still like, I had given up some of my darker things I was doing, I would say, but I was still like drinking and kind of partying and kind of just like, but I was in a lull. I was like, this isn't going anywhere. You know, I was getting, I guess I was, you know, 24, and you're getting to that point where you're like, okay, you know, this is, you know, where's this really getting me, you know? And so anyway, I was trying to figure that out. And then, so a lot of things happened like kind of together to get me to that point. So I read Rudolf Steiner's Philosophy of Freedom, which if you guys haven't read that, I mean,
yeah, I got to check that out.
I've read it a few times, and it's not an easy thing to read.
I was going to say, if my brain can handle it.
No, you like really, you take your time and you really try to understand what he's saying.
I'll read a page a night.
I mean, a lot of the spiritual stuff is complex.
I'll read a sentence a night. You know?
So I had read that. Obviously, you know, I feel really fortunate to have really cool parents in the sense that they never forced any kind of thing one way or the other. But then my dad especially has always had the anthroposophy thing going on, you know. So I read that, and that, like, I remember kind of around that time I read that, and then I read Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, and then a couple other things about him, and then a couple other kind of these kind of guru types, like Vedanta Krishna. What the heck was that guy? Bhakti Vedanta was his name. He was another guru type, and I think he was the guy that George Harrison was into. So I read his stuff, and
dude, George Harrison's solo shit after he did all that's fucking unbelievable.
Yeah. So I was into that, but then what happened? But I was still like, in some ways, I was kind of in this like in between kind of thing. But then New Year's happened to lead into 2009, and I got mono and got massively sick and bedridden for like 3 weeks straight. And then and couldn't.
I remember that.
You remember that? Yeah, and I couldn't
gave him the mono.
Yeah.
We're playing beer pong inside.
No, I was playing beer pong, and that's exactly.
I know, that's what I'm saying. We were inside the house, dude, like in the living room.
Play beer pong in a house in Detroit, you're gonna get mono.
No, we were at some kind of a yuppie party thing. Yeah, that's what it was.
I thought it was
the yups are spreading it.
But
yep.
So anyway, so what happened was, though, that this is one of those things, kind of like the accident, where it's like it seems like this awful thing, but then it's this, it's like
what came before? Did you have
awakening
mono before the accident, or did you have mono after the accident?
What happened was I had the accident, and then it was like starting to really question things, but then got like massively addicted to the painkillers that I was prescribed to.
Oh shit!
And then kind of circled back to some other darker habits, and then so that this was a couple of years after that I was struggling and trying to get over that, and it was really tough, man. And so anyway, then the mono happened, and then right around that same time, it was Dan Zielinski was like, I'm going to go. Our good friend Dan, who's an awesome musician and bass player and great friend and great guy.
Doesn't he live in like China now or something?
He does, yeah. And he's playing music and seems like he's doing really awesome, really well. But anyway, he was like, Dan, yeah, I miss him. But he was like, oh, I'm gonna go take a yoga class. You want to go? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Because I was just really open. This was right after the mono, and what happened with the mono is I was bedridden, so I couldn't do anything. I couldn't eat. I lost a ton of weight, couldn't eat or anything. So then I went to the class with them. And then right after that, then I kept reading and kept taking stuff in. And then kind of started dating Sarah, who's my wife now. And then she got me to go to the yoga shelter. Now that's a whole long story to get to the point, because the yoga shelter was owned by a guy who was a serious and still is an avid follower of Swamiji, and that's how I got exposed to the Swami. So then I went to training to become a yoga instructor a little after that, and read that The Fall of the Human Intellect. That's the book, the kind of the intro book for me. And so then what I did was I would get up at 4 and I would read a sentence of that book and then rewrite it in my journal in my own words. I did that with the whole book, and that took me about a year, and got pretty. Then that was it's that at that point that was a pretty serious endeavor, and so I was kind of committed to it. And,
sure.
But what I found though was that there's real tangible change that you can bring with these things. So that's a long story, but we all have different stories. We all have different paths. I find that interesting, and I think that. Your story doesn't sound like you kind of were deciding any one thing or the other. You just kind of were living life, and things just started to evolve. And then you kind of found yourself later on when you were kind of already into it, and you kind of understood that this is what this is. And, but it sounds like that's kind of how it works for most people. I know for me, I was going through a tough time, and I found a text and it, a book and it, papers, whatever you want to call them. And it kind of opened up my eyes, I guess reopened my eyes. I grew up religious, but it reopened up my eyes to spirituality, and that it doesn't have to be this brick and mortar, community type thing. It's a very self, involved thing where only you can find the right path that works for you, and only you can decide what's going to be the right play for you. And since I've found my own path, I've noticed my fears, anxieties, troubles, aches, pains, whatever has kind of gone away, because it does push you in a direction where you're like, this is fucking good. This is awesome. I'm striving for something, there's a goal here, and it's not like a goal like, oh, I'm going to make this amount of money or I'm going to do this. It's a goal that's going to
like transcend time, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that could oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that was another Michael's minute. Preach on, brother. Preach on.
Yeah, but what you find though when you have an experience like that where you have like a self-change type of scenario is that you get a real sense of the fact that, like, then when I measure that against the nights where it would be, you know, getting to be, the sun was about to come up and I'm lying in bed like, please let me fall asleep. I just want to fall asleep. You know, like you know what hell is, you know. Right. And then you find out, wait, I'm doing that to myself. And I don't even know myself. And then you find out, well, here's another way. And it's through it's that internal thing. Like you said, it's an individual internal process, and you can make it one or the other, you know?
Right.
And
well, I find it super, I mean, look, you've obviously learned a lot. You're well-spoken on the subject. You know what you're talking about. I think it brings an interesting light, because I don't think there's not a lot of people that think about spirituality in general, but let alone concepts within ancient, you know, texts and religions and stuff that convey messages that are still super useful today. And I don't think there's enough learning of those types of things going on right now. It's like we were talking about earlier, it's like which Kardashian's got the bigger ass, you know, like that's more important than
I'll tell you who does
your self-spirituality, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, and that's always been the draw for me with the whole thing of being a yoga instructor, because because of course it's a strange thing when you're talking about things that are very, very important to you, and they're very internal and very personal and very, you know, like you said, spiritual. But then I'm teaching a class, and it's in a lot of ways very physical, and people it's kind of like attached to just that part of it, because it's so, it is awesome. I mean, you get to take care of yourself, but there's a whole other world to it that's always been the part that I connect with.
Could you do yoga and still be Tamasic?
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of what you're talking about.
I do it all the time, man.
You're doing it for the health and not the self, kind of.
That's exactly right. So that's I don't want to say it's one of my fears, but it's one of the things that's
probably less detrimental though than like other things, because
it could be, but you know,
you can work on yourself too. You know, if you do yoga 3 times a week and one of the time you're just doing it for, you know, your spirituality, and the other times you're doing it for your health or whatever. I mean, at least you're doing something along those lines, you know.
Well, but this Saturday I'm doing a class called Beyond the Physical, and I'm doing it just for this reason, because
plug it.
I'll plug it, man. Yeah, 12:30.
Shameless, baby. I like it.
Well, hey, you know, but no, here's the real truth of it though. Like when you say, oh, well, you'll be doing yoga, or here's how you do yoga. You try to find yourself. That's it. You know, the poses are a way to prepare the body for seated meditation and to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, it looks like a big game of Twister is what it looks like. But yeah.
Well, all that stuff that gets into like gymnastic type things.
Right.
You know, it's like that's not the main event. You know what I mean?
Right.
The self is.
You said that the physical exercises are actually quite a small fraction of what actually yoga is.
It's barely even. There's not a single thing about that in the Bhagavad Gita, for instance. You know, that's not even. It's an intro. It's not, you know, it's not the end game. You know, it's I'm talking about just the postures, because when we say yoga,
that's what I'm talking about.
What yoga, the word means, is to more or less to rejoin with the self, and so the word religion has a really similar meaning at its roots, to rejoin with God, basically. You know.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
When you teach, do you talk about these things, or is it just purely like relax and do this or do that, or are you teaching about the, you know, you know, the Tamasic and the Rajasic and all that stuff, or what's going on? Just so I've actually never been to a yoga class, so I
try to balance. I mean, I try to throw in some things, but at the same time, you know, I'm no master of anything either. So I don't want to come off as some preachy person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I try to hold the study group where we all it is we're just discussing like we're doing right now, kind of.
Yeah, but by not preaching, you're actually following your own philosophy, which is to, you're not getting involved with that part of yourself,
So yeah, and it's a balance, because then I also feel like I have an obligatory duty as well to not just to at least try to expose people to the idea that there's a whole other world to it.
So you're dropping crumbs. You're just like allowing like little bits to like hopefully inspire some of these people to look into it or something.
Yeah, I try to. Or for instance, I'll be in class and I'll tell a little thing that we talked about in study group,
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is there are thousands of people that come to the classes at the studio, and only 2 or 3 show up consistently,
Gotcha.
And that's Beyond the Physical, Saturday at 12:30.
Yeah. This guy,
the yoga shelter.
No, really, that's why I'm doing that event, is because there's so much more, there's so much more.
There's a lot to life, bro. You got to keep doing shit.
Yeah, just like you guys, man.
You got to keep on trucking. Yeah, well, that's the whole goal of this podcast. We've said it before. It's just to bring more knowledge to the world. There's too much stupid shit out there. There's not enough intelligent conversations or inquisitive conversations or things that are opening up people's minds. It's more just visual in front of your face stuff and less thinking and belief and faith and all that kind of stuff. So we're just trying to get disseminate some of this information that we've learned, and we're not experts either, but at the same time we're reading up on the stuff, we're learning the stuff, we're ingesting it the way anybody else would.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, that's one thing Swami says, is that thinking is an art and it's a skill, and it has to be practiced, just like learning any high skilled trade or any an instrument or something. It's not something you just we think because we have thoughts that we know how to think, but it's a real discipline, that like that governing of the mind with the intellect, and it's a balance. So yeah, man,
that's a good way to go out tonight, Chris.
Hey,
all right, folks,
thanks for coming, my man.
Thanks for joining us on another episode, Christopher.
I love it.
All right. Well, there you have it. We got another one in the books, Eastern philosophy and the Vedas. So we're going to kick out, and we'll see you on episode 11. It's a mystery.
All right.
Thanks, guys.